Hey there, my name is Sage and you're watching D&D Daily. Today I'm doing a reply video to one of our subscribers' comments asking about running combat as a new DM for new players. In this video I hope to give some tips that'll help this subscriber out and anyone else who's asking the same question. Just like a newborn baby, we need to crawl before we walk before we run, and that's how I'm going to break this down. We're going to have a crawling phase, a walking phase, and a running phase. In the crawling phase, our goal as a DM is to familiarize ourselves and our players with the game mechanics and running combat in general. Start with under-leveled combat. So if you're pulling this from a source book, the source book will often say something like, this combat will include a number of goblins equal to your player characters. Now that's a suggestion. Especially when you're first starting out, don't be afraid to pull that number back. So if you have 6 player characters and it says 6 goblins, run 4 instead. The idea here isn't necessarily to challenge them. It shouldn't be a combat that is going to decimate them or break them. It's a combat to understand mechanics and to tell a story. The tutorial, in other words. Now, I'm going to tell a story about my first time ever DMing. So, I was playing with a friend and his kids. My idea was that he was going to lead them all, so I made him the tank so he could survive and last long enough to rally all these kids together and get something done. So the combat starts, and I target him first, thinking that, I can shoot him and it'll be fine. Well, I roll a nat 20, and then I roll max damage. And this was with a goblin with a bow, so it was 6, then 6, so 12 damage plus the modifier, whatever that is. I think it was 14 damage, and he had exactly 14 HP. So they were level 1, and it just took him out in one shot. So, right at the beginning of combat, I took out the person that I was relying on to help everybody. So he's down, and all the kids had to figure it out. And it worked. They did just fine. Here's the lesson that I got from that. Don't be afraid to fib a die here and there when you're first doing this tutorial combat, and do it in favor of the party. So if you're rolling multiple natural 20s, maybe just say you hit instead of you crit. Or maybe say you miss when you hit. Whatever it takes, this is a tutorial. We're not trying to kill a player here. We're not trying to make it realistic here. We're trying to give them an introduction to combat in D&D. Once we're comfortable with that, you can move to the walking phase. The walking phase is about understanding and gauging your party's strength level, as well as practicing adjusting combat difficulty on the fly. So, in the walking phase, if the book recommends putting in 6 goblins, put in 6 goblins and see how the party does. Do they crush it? Well, maybe when the book is suggesting things, we increase the difficulty a little bit. Or are they struggling with it? Okay, maybe we decrease it a little bit. And if we're not using the book as an example, then there's always suggested CR calculators, and that's something else we can use. And of course, both of those are suggestions. They're kind of shots in the dark. This is a thing that you get with experience and feeling. You're not necessarily going to be a pro at gauging combat right from the beginning, which is where adjusting combat difficulty on the fly comes in and is a big deal. There are tons of ways to adjust combat difficulty. So going back to the goblin encounter, let's say that my goblins are kind of beating the party up. What I may do is whoever does damage to the next goblin, no matter how much damage they do, I'm just going to say, how do you want to do this? And let them do a cool sync kill to kill my goblin. Then I would roll a wisdom save behind the screen of, do these goblins run in fear from that awesome kill? They're notorious cowards. I can play on that and have them flee even if they have the advantage because, the barbarian cleaving one of their goblin kind in half is enough to break their will to fight, and they can run. And that wisdom save is something you can roll legitimately, or you could fib if you wanted to. In that example, we did multiple different things. We protected our party from dying because, as storytellers, sometimes we don't want them to die right now. It could be very anticlimactic and disappointing for someone to die to a goblin. And maybe we don't want that to happen, and so we're protecting them from that. We also made the person who got the kill feel awesome because they got an awesome sync kill. They feel strong. They feel like it was earned. And the third thing we did is because the goblins fleed, now there's a path to the next story you want to tell. So you can have them flee to their lair or to the boss's place, and now they have a path to follow. So it's a benefit to our storytelling, our balancing, and our overall enjoyment of the game. There are tons of ways to balance on the fly, both ways. You can adjust health to be lower or higher, Or maybe they get a phase 2 where they have 2 actions in initiative. And this is really what the walk phase is all about, is getting comfortable with adjusting combats on the fly so that you can make every combat feel the difficulty level that you're really shooting for, which is pretty important. This is a great time to add objectives to your combat. So instead of just fighting till they're dead, now you might have to pull a lever. Now you might have to retrieve the item that they stole. Or you might have to open a series of locks to get a door open. There's a million different objective-based combats, and this is a good time to bring those in. This is also a good time to bring in extra complications. The ceiling breaks and rubble's falling everywhere. Lava spilling into the room. There's a tornado nearby. There's all sorts of extra complications you can add, both man-made, traps, or, completely natural. Storms, for example. Moving into the run phase is all about challenging and exciting our players. This is a good time to start letting go of the reins of controlling the outcome of the combat. Once you have built a trust with your players and once they understand the game that you're running, and if you're wanting to run a very difficult game where death can happen and it's just about being realistic, then let things happen as they happen. If a player dies, they die. We try and make it realistic, we try and make it difficult, we try and make it fun. So going back to the goblin example, if I roll a nat 20, it's a nat 20, you're being dropped. There is no fibbing in this situation, there is no adjusting combat, it is what it is. Create situations and see how they handle them. This is a time to let players surprise you. You just create a situation with no knowledge of how they're going to handle it. And this is really exciting as a DM because you're not controlling the outcome. You're not forcing a story. You're watching the story happen as much as they are. And it's a really rewarding place to be. Though, that being said, don't rush it. There's no need to try and push yourself into the running phase or walking phase or crawling phase. Go to where it feels natural for you. And read your players as well. If you can kind of feel that somebody's enjoyment from D&D comes from their character, maybe don't kill that character because you're going to hurt their enjoyment of the game. My gauge for my players is different. Some players I will protect, while others I won't, because I know that their love for the game isn't based on that particular character, where others is, and that's completely okay. And as a DM, it's kind of our job to understand what our players are going to get out of it. If you take nothing else from the video, take this. As a DM, the only way you're going to get good at these things is practice. You're just going to have to jump in there and do it, and mistakes are going to be made. I have never left a session as a DM saying, that went perfectly, I had nothing to learn. Every single session I leave saying, I could have done that better, and that was a good learning experience. Go in with that attitude and keep communication tight. Let the players know that if you killed one on accident, my bad, maybe this combat was a little bit too difficult. Hey, I'm still learning. Let's adjust some stories, do a little bit of retcon, and move on from there. That's completely okay. Remember that as long as all the players are having a good time, including you, then you did a good job. This has been a little bit of a hot take on combat balancing for new DMs and new players. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. We are D&D Daily. We release new D&D content every single day. So if that's interesting to you, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you on the next one. Later.